Hello and welcome to this very special broadcast, the Women Writers Festival. Women Writers Festival is the world's largest traveling festival focused on women authors and writers. And thanks to the virtual sessions, we're very fortunate to bring you a large number of authors from different parts of the world and add to the edition's strength and diversity in conversations. Today, I have a very, very powerful, very strong voice with us. Devaki Jain is the author of the Brass Notebook. This is her memoir, but she's also authored several books and is an economist, a feminist economist, if I may add. A Padma Shri awardee and somebody who truly inspires women, students, economists all over the world. Devaki Jain, thank you very much for joining us here on the Women Writers Festival, and congrats on your book.
Thank you so much, Shaili, for having me on your program.
The Brass Notebook is your memoir, and it comes out at a time when our country and the idea of democracy is an entire flux. Many leaves of your new book talk about feminist economy. It talks about the stature and status of Dalit women and women from marginalized communities. It also talks about your personal journeys through growing up and your various stages of life. When you were writing this book, what was the one incident that stood for you the most in your memoir that young women like us can take something from?
No, I would not like to say that is the most important, because as you might have noticed, for me, the most important part of what I wrote was to write about my mother. I felt that that kind of person needs to be revealed, understood to everyone in the world, rest of society, because that resonates a kind of not only courage and intelligence, but the flexibility of women of that generation who could transform themselves into become modern and things like that. So that was also a message, in the sense that young women these days must be feeling pretty upset with their grandmothers and mothers, because the freedom that they want may not be what those women feel they should have. But if you see those other women as themselves very progressive, having moved from what I used to consider the cave. I mean, my mother got married at 11 or 12, but what she emerged, fortunately, thanks to my father's modernity, where he did not hurt her or injure her, but walked with her, is something I found so amazing. So in a way, there are two messages. One is, look, it used to happen before, there were women who rode over it. The other is, be tolerant of the elders. They are not actually doing it against you, but they themselves have very hard lives. So most of the mothers and grandmothers of the young women of today would have had hard lives, in the sense that they were not as free as these young women. So they have to be seen as somebody who can teach you something on how to negotiate a very risky kind of world today outside. I mean, the risks that young girls are exposed to today is in many ways more than we were. Because this mixing up students, and then there's now drugs, and also the peer, the women they admire are those who are totally free of all binds. And this must be hurting their mothers and grandmothers. So it's a way of saying they were there, they were very tied up, but they liberated themselves. So you also have to find a way of liberating yourself without hurting others. So I enjoyed that really very much. But this book was not addressed only to young women, as you know. It was partly addressed to the current political scenario in the world. I mean, the fact that the developing countries or the former colonies were so well organized to fight against the Eurocentric intellectuals, Eurocentric politics, Eurocentric economy. I wanted to show that that's collapsed now. We are all liberals tied to capitalism. But there was a time that countries like India were trying very hard to create another world power, which is the power of the ex-colonies that failed. But that's something I wanted to share with the new generation, that we were doing that. We were there. So maybe someday they'll do it too, God knows. But a very unequal world, anyway, inside our countries and outside. There was an attempt in those days with the South Commission, the NAM, to sort of throw away the gown of colonialism, the language of colonialism, the economics of colonialism, but we didn't succeed. So that was another kind of sharing I was trying to do.
Indeed, and in fact, there are several parts of your book that are so relevant to our times, as you said, where there's a sort of breakdown of institutions. But let's pick up democracy as an institution. We're a world where our constitutions are defined in democratic countries by we the people. But we often forget to include she the people. Women have traditionally been sort of not either included in the economic process in a way that reflects their bigger contribution, or in many ways our definitions have been skewed. One of the chapters in your book talks about the importance of looking at issues around us, economies around us, through a gendered lens. Why is that even so critical today?
So that last question again, why?
Why is it important to look at economies through a gendered lens?
I have a little difference with that kind of position. In fact, you had even articulated it saying women in the economy. I have never thought that we need to highlight that women are we need to highlight anything more than saying that women are very important economic agents in the economy. Their work, whether it's at home or outside, has to be valued and respected. All that part I like. But I don't see any need for making it the way you would like. That I feel is not necessary, and it's also that's not a position I would take. I've always seen society and economy as inclusive of men, women, Dalit, Muslim, child, adult, and therefore it's never to be that only she the economy, I have never felt that is the way we women can upturn the hierarchies that we have inherited over history. We can make ourselves equal through both the fact we are doing things which are very critical and the voice of people like you who are leading feminist networks to reveal that, but not necessarily to replace men. It's a world in which we need to understand and live with each other, and all that we can do as feminists, it seems to me, is to highlight our role, and we have done that. I mean, many of the feminist economists today are constantly revealing the economic value of what women are doing, which has not been recognized as economic. That is true, that it adds to the wealth of the country, it adds to product. What is economics? I mean, what is it? How is it different from sociology? You're saying that everything that you do adds to GDP or to the wealth of the economy. So that we have already done quite a lot, showing that the measuring of workers is inadequate. So there are many feminist economists, and including myself many years ago, showing that there were women who were doing what contributes conventionally to GDP. I use the word conventionally because the new movement is something called the care economy, to say that those women who are doing childcare, cooking, cleaning, this also is an economic contribution. My generation was plugging for a prior demand that there are women who are threshing, weeding, carding, cotton picking, who are not recognized as workers and therefore are not legitimately getting wage, nor unionization, nor the labor security. I still think that if we can make that first shift first, which shows that those who are contributing in the conventional center GDP need to be given all the privileges of being economic workers. And we can wait, if that can be done at all, to see that cooking, cleaning, and childcare are also given an economic value. I mean, it doesn't have to be in queue, but we shouldn't neglect that there are women who are doing a lot of work which is contributing to GDP directly in the conventional sense, who are not recognized as workers. Now, why do I want them recognized as workers? There are so many benefits if you're recognized as worker. Firstly, you can unionize. Secondly, accept all the labor laws. So that could be a great gift, in my opinion, to those women who are in other economic spaces than you and I are. That is, who are, I hate to use the word poor, but those who are living on the margins, who really scrape together something to survive. They are actually workers. So if we can show that that is economic contribution, but done under very bad circumstances, it doesn't have a wage, it doesn't get registered as an occupation, then that is a very important first step for the people who are in the lower end of the economy. It may not be for you and me. So that's my vision is for that lower end of the economy, and the men and women are working there, and the kind of invisibility of what women are contributing to that very conventional economy. I can give you examples that women will do the carding, women will beat the silver for a man who's doing filigree, women will mold the mud for a man who's finally doing the pot. Those pre-product processing is all done by women. They're not recognized as work. To my mind, that should be recognized first, a wage fixed for that, so that they also get all the benefits of being a worker. Before we start thinking of childcare as to be paid for, pay for that. I've got a list of about 20 products where women are doing work which contributes to that product, but it's not seen as work. So there's a job there for all of you to do, which can be very helpful to the economic contribution of women.
As an economist, how do you view the measuring of household work and some of the other, roles that you reflected on? And I think I'm not asking you to be realistic at any point, but I'm just saying that, there have been many petitions of late to do so, but just seems like when it comes to institutionalizing that or finding data points with it, there's always a reason for people to say, and governments to say that we're not ready to measure this. How do you view that measurement?
I don't think I've understood you fully. Are you saying that care work, which is what we call the 3 Cs, childcare, cleaning, cooking, that this is not being measured, and that the movement of many of the modern feminists is that these 3 jobs are to be recognized as adding value. I don't know if they're also saying that it should be monetized and given a wage. But
yes,
look, there are 2 steps.
Not necessarily given wage, but recognized it as imputed cost.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with recognition, and therefore there are many ways of responding. One is to make sure that the government provides that infrastructure. If you know the Scandinavian countries and other parts of Germany, the government is obliged to put the infrastructure for childcare and all the things that we do at home every day as an unequal share of work. So that pressure to build the infrastructure for women to be able to do both is very important. That is where I would like to fight for as something that the government should do. But I'm not ready yet to see these work as being monetized, because I still would like the prior thing to be monetized, that the work women are adding to GDP to be from invisibility. I would like them to have visibility and a wage and the recognition that they are workers in the conventional sense.
Ms. Jain, if you look at the workforce levels in India, at least the measured organized workforce levels in India has been drastically dwindling so far as women go. What, according to you, is the issue there? Is it that we haven't rethought our measurement style so far on what is going to be termed as a woman's economic input? Or there is a gap in us making the idea of a working woman less and less aspirational as a society?
Yes, that has been one of my quarrels from 1975 when I started to get into what is called economic statistics. That the work that women are doing, which is the conventional economic work they're doing, has not been counted properly by the national sample survey people. The kind of questions they ask excludes them. And there are women now of your generation who have taken this forward, people like Ashwini Deshpande and others, connecting or contacting or trying to argue with the National Sample Survey that you're trapping women who are not able to articulate that they're doing economic activity into something where they are excluded from the workforce. So there is a statistical issue there. I don't know whether you want to go into the detail, but one can go into the detail if you want to. That when the NSSO goes to a household to find out what they're all doing, there are codes which they use, and there are 93 codes. The last code says not doing anything, and which is in the first set, 92. The first 92, if you say something yes, then you become a worker. If you don't say you're a worker by saying yes to any of those, you are put into code 93, which is no work, domestic activity. We said that actually that woman doesn't perceive in those 92 codes her work, but there's another way of capturing that. And so if you ask her, what did you do for the last 1 week, say for half days? She says, oh, I threshed, I weeded. Then say, that is an occupation. So she enters into the workforce. That's such a critical thing, though, as I said, the move today is care work, looking at that as work and then trying to recognize the burden that women are carrying. For me, the earlier one is important, to get them into recognition as contributing to the traditional GDP. Because once you do that, then you get all the other things right. You get wage recognition, you get recognition by the labor laws, you can be unionized. That's another whole platform that I think women in the less privileged economic sections of India require. And that platform should be given to them as quickly as possible, because they are suffering with lack of any of the social legislation that supports labor.
Okay, let me just move to another chapter of your book where you're talking about the Me Too movement. Coming from somebody like yourself, it's a powerful telling story of how this is not a new movement. It has been happening, and women needed to speak up. Why did you choose to speak up about it in this book? And what was that incident? How did that incident leave you? Because I feel like young women have started to normalize the idea of assault when they go to work or when they go to college, and it's something they have to just deal with, which is such a sad state for a country to have its women do that.
I'm glad you asked that question. For years, I felt I shouldn't reveal that. Partly, I thought that my mother and the elders in the family would find it very upsetting. It would humiliate a family to know that an adult in the family was misbehaving with the girls in the family. And since reputation and dignity and how others see you was so important for that generation, your grandmother's generation, because they lived in a kind of more in community, even though they may not have lived in one village, they were living more like a community. That, oh, the aunties, uncles, grandchild did that, the grandchild's great grandchild, it was like that. For example, I'll give you an example which will make you laugh. Vaijayanti Mala, the famous actress, she's actually a second cousin of mine. Her mother was the first one who gave up the traditional bondage, Vasundhara, and became a film star and broke away from the Tamil Brahmin nest of not doing anything which is looks daring, which looks like woman is opting for herself. So that kind of thing hurt the family's izzat, as you say in the north. So in a way, I felt that my aunts and the children of this uncle, who was a absolutely degenerate sexual assaulter, I realized, would be hurt. And my sister told me, don't say it now. Those girls will be hurt. You'll be opening up what the rotten man her father was. So I kept it to myself, though feminists like Gloria Steinem and others said, Devaki, you must say it. Because if you say it, you're supporting the young women today who are being exposed to that kind of assault. And if they see you, they may feel, well, she was assaulted, but she came out of it. So the whole truth is that you come out of it, and that's the hope you want to give to this child who has been molested and abused by her relatives. But I was not able to do that because I said, my sister said, calm down, calm down. So we calmed down, and I only published it now when all the actors in that drama are dead. I mean, both the man who did it as well as his elder children are not going to be able to access this book. Many of them are no more and they're not in a position. So it was to protect. It's a bad thing what I did, but it was such a pressure, especially by my younger sister, who was a very traditionally locked in but brilliant woman who didn't want the family to be exposed to this. So that's why I mentioned it much later. And I wanted to mention it just exactly for the reason that you described, that others who are going through this a lot, I can tell you that in their families, uncles, you must have seen that in the films also, are the ones, the mamas are the ones who are the most dreadful adults in a family which is a joint family. So that had to be shown, and I hope that people take note of it and don't tell their daughters to stay home with adult male relatives or throw adult male relatives out, which is very difficult in India's kinship habits. Yeah, I did mention it just for the younger people to feel that you can have that happen to you, and yet you can come out and be what I am now, a strong woman. But I know I kept it as a secret for 60 years or more.
Yeah. I wonder, Miss Jain, if at some point in our as young women who are trying to really battle both leftover stories, leftovers in terms of traditional stuff, when it comes to women not being able to have access, not being able to get out these societal constructs, have sexism not just at home but sometimes and often from their mothers. A lot of this weighs us down from having aspirations. And I'm wondering, as somebody who's been with many other women and is herself one who had aspirations and ambitions, how do you think women will finally unleash themselves and say, listen, I want a career, it's okay, I have to just deal with all of this? Or will we finally say as a society, high time we change our mindsets, high time we change our mindsets? Because I feel that a lot of women of our generation today are saying, I have so much to deal with, I'm spent, I have too much to deal with.
Two things. One is there's something wrong with the recording. Your voice is not coming with, the diction is not clear. Okay. So maybe you should tell the young man who's doing.
I'll just check. Yeah. Okay.
No, now I can hear you better. Just articulate your question again. I could hear your mouth.
Simply saying that women today are having to deal with a lot of sexism as they did in the past, but now they're stuck. They are ambitious. At the same time, the societal mindsets are pulling them down. Is there a problem on the aspiration front? Is there an aspirational gap among women today because they're just exhausted?
I'm glad you raised that question because I have relatives, young women who have actually broken all those rules in which I was bound. They're happily living with boys that they met in college, and there are even from very orthodox Jain links of my family, there are girls who have decided that they'll do what they want. So there is both living with boys whom they like and shifting those men according to their preference, and also same-sex love. That is also something that used to be taboo. I have young relatives who are in same-sex, uh, so gay as they call it. I'm so proud of them because that is the way you have to affirm who you are and what you want to be to society. So I think it has changed, and I think it has changed for the better. I don't think the young girls of middle class are frightened anymore. That's my feeling, but you would know more because I don't look at that very closely these days. I only know what I see from my relatives. But so someone else will be able to guide you or answer that question, whether it's widespread, this guts that I've noticed. And secondly, maybe it's only the urban educated and not the hinterland. I don't know enough about rural India today.
Sure.
And there also, maybe it is only the rich and the educated. Or maybe it's more prevalent amongst the less privileged and the more economically deprived, because sometimes I often feel that they are freer than us if only they can get their families off their backs. So when you read Poolan Devi's story, for example, which is such a moving story, I wish you would sometime bring that out in one of your media things, because there is this woman who was actually so badly treated, and I think that's how it's going to happen to many girls. If their parents can't afford them, they go and put them into somebody else's family who treats them first as a domestic and then as a sexual victim. So this must be happening a lot in rural India. I don't know enough, but such women are to be looked at as the models and not the young who are now coming into the urban middle class. For example, you take the National Law School or you take Jindal. There are girls who are coming from all over India, including my grandniece. So then they live with co-educational hostels, they then have partners, and the parents and grandparents just accept that as reality. But would that happen if it was someone other type of neighborhood, another location they came from? I have no idea. I have not done research, but I feel worried and concerned because I would like all those young women to be free to make a choice of lovers over a period of time, not bother at all about tradition and that. What do you think? I mean, what have you found in your work that you do as She the People?
So I think one of the big things in terms of the work we do, we recognize that I think that there is this sheen of openness around us, that people are broad-minded and are accepting, but actually it's pretty deep-rooted, the conservatism that we've always had, and that it is very much prevalent even in urban India today, because though most of our audiences are urban, we increasingly find that they are suffering just as much as somebody was, let's say, about 30 years ago in a very conservative village, because families are beginning to find that social media is ruining them. Ladki kharab ho rahi hai. And that, they go to college, they get educated, and education is now making them too proud, too independent. And these are conversations happening in urban India, which is where actually my next question was going to come from, that we are talking in times of love jihad. The conversations in our country today, should they be more focused on our societal issues than economic emancipation of women, which is a big issue too? But we seem to not have a standing in society. We can't love who we want. We can't stand for ourselves. We can't menstruate and talk about the word, openly in families. We haven't fixed these problems at all. Is economic independence that important if some of these conversations haven't moved?
I like your question so much, and I like also the introductory remarks that you gave before the question. I'm so glad. I was a little hesitant in bringing the word love jihad into this program because it is such a politically hot word, and I didn't want you to get into any kind of skirmish with the state, which is now targeting any group or any institution which wants to be um, free to speak up the truth. So I was holding that back just to protect you, but I'm so glad you came out with that. I mean, it's such nonsense, really. and it's so clearly it's a clearly conservative fundamentalism. And you can imagine a person of my age, the generations that I've been through, having now at this point to confront India of this kind. I mean, the India that we got in 47, 55, and I was already a graduate in 1953, that is hundreds of years ago, really, to find that we have come to this point, which used to be Cromwell and others in England, where they had Catholics fighting Protestants and putting people into hanging them for not believing in something or the other. We broke away from that, and other countries, fortunately, have also broken away. Christianity stopped being the kind of final holding uh, chain for all of us. Hinduism was such an open thing. You didn't even have to go to a temple to be a Hindu. You just have to pray inside your heart for Gayatri or whatever the japam is. And here we are going back to God knows what century. I don't think any century in India was as bigoted as what we are facing today. So it hurts so much to find a political group which claims to be, in some sense, religious, putting religion into the dirt by bringing up issues which were not part of either the Upanishads or the Hindu dharma or whatever, and being vicious with young people. So I cannot tell you more how how not how grieved I feel. But I also think, and I hope you will lead all this, that there is a place for us to fight. There is a niche, and I think feminist young women are taking up that niche. You remember how they fought for Shaheen Bagh, how they run wherever there is any um, communal fight. Remember, they went to North Delhi. I am very proud of the young feminists of India today. They are the only ones who are waving some kind of progressive flag, not only for women, but for rights, and trying to bring back India to what she was. But that's not enough. Now, if you see the scenario, you don't see them so much out there because it's gone beyond repair. So, how do we handle that? I think, as I said, your group and others have to. And today, Banu Pratap Mehta's article has been very healing for me because he's shown that, he's shown what's happening to us. But mobilizing us to protest is something which has to be political. And I know you are doing it, and there's a women's group that's doing it. But it cannot be only women. It has to be women, Dalits, Muslims, to really shake away this PALL, that is falling over us, which is Hindu fundamentalism. So I can't tell you, I found it unbearable when this young couple was separated and saying that they were. And then there were other stories you must have heard where the young man, if he's a Muslim, is actually killed by the girl's brothers. So that it's unbelievable that this can happen in India. But it's happening because it gets the sanction of the state. And it requires a huge uprising. And I think the uprising has to be the kind that you are doing, that is the voice of women, because it can't anymore be the Marxist voice or the non-Hindutva voice. It has to be the voice of women. So you're very well located to be able to draw on the strength of women to fight against this form of conservatism and this form of misinterpretation of religiosity. How religion has been abused is been abused not by us, the feminists and those who marry across religious domains or boundaries. It's being abused by those who say that they are defending religion. Because this is not religion. This is not Hinduism. This is not Islam. This is just old-fashioned fundamentalism of the kind that Britain had maybe centuries ago. So we have to fight that. And I think there's a political fight there also. the electoral
Yeah.
politics, you have to participate and shift all this.
Yes.
Look at me at this
You know,
age,
yes.
because I'm looking at you and all the young people to transform
No,
politics.
I think it's something we all as young women should think about, that if we want to have a voice, we also need to get our hands dirty. We need to go out there and participate in real politics and have more conversations. That's important. I have two very quick related questions. One is that in India, when we look at gender equality, right, or gender discrimination on the other side of it, it's not just gender most of the time. It's gender and it's caste and it's where you come from, which village you were born, what is your surname, and which class you belong to. Does that make the efforts of any feminist movement to bring equality to women in India much harder? Yet also brings it the most context that we cannot have equality until we look at all these aspects.
It's a complicated question, and I don't think I have a smooth answer to that. Um, we are a highly stratified society, and therefore, bringing unity and one solid voice is difficult. But it's my belief, and maybe that's just my idealism, that if anybody can do it, it's women. Women, in my experience of, let's say, the Mexico conference in 1975, which is the first time I saw what can be called the power of solidarity of women. Till I went to Mexico's conference, I didn't realize there was a thing called women, which binds us. There you have 10,000 women sitting and being like one voice. It was one of the most incredible educational experience I had. So there is something called women, and we all felt that we were women. And of course, beyond that, I know we have LGBTQ, that's acceptable. But this sense of solidarity on an identity, like you now have for Dalit, we got at that time. We have to use that now. And I know that many groups in India are doing what is called political platforms. This, but we are not able to get it beyond ourselves, like 30, 40, 100 people. At one point, Ruth Manorama, a Dalit leader in Bangalore, she had set up a National Alliance of Women. And we had gone across India and we were taking up issues of poverty and caste discrimination. But we couldn't make the leap between an NGO and formal politics. Civil society is still very lively, but civil society has not been able to make a leap into politics. So, how to make civil society's leaders become political persons? We have to become political persons. We have to be in the legislative assembly, we have to be in the parliament. That leap will probably be the most healing and enabling for pushing out all the um, ugly voices, ugly movements that are taking place in India today. It used to be a dream of my generation. Even in 1992, we thought if we invade parliament, then we can transform this country. But we could not invade parliament. None of these civil society groups can get into parliament, even to the legislatures, because it requires money these days. So there's such a lot of challenges in front of us. But I do hope your generation will struggle and enter formal politics and then maybe protect this country from further deterioration socially and economically.
My final question to you is, the role of men in this entire effort to find equal and a level playing field for women. Do you think that, well, I wouldn't even say, do you think, how can men rise up to this in a bigger way than they are today?
That's such an interesting question. It has never struck me. I mean, it's so personal, what we have to say. Because how many of us have really got the experience to make a generalization about whether men will rise up to women's demands or commands. I can't answer that with any kind of confidence. All I can say is that there is a lot of controversy whether Gandhi was really so supportive of women, because when you read the biographies and things like that, you realize that he was a very important person and certainly a brilliant genius. But certainly there were very many fault lines in his attitudes within families and so on. So we don't want to pick that up. Who else? So how do we picturize what men can do for us? We can only take some of these icons and see whether they were they were not. Uh, I used to know all those early socialists like Achyut Patwardhan, Jayaprakash Narayan, and they were really not complete in some ways. They were not like my husband, who was a wonderful Gandhian, but he was also a passionate man, and he was so modern, and he could have been anything, not just Indian and Gandhian. It's very rare to find men of that quality who are so liberated here that their gender is not important. It's the liberated mind, the liberated body that. So I don't know enough, but it would be important what you're asking. If we did have that kind of uh, human beings in large numbers, and I'm not at the moment in the swim of things to know about who are all the male intellectuals, male
Sure.
activists who can be brought into this, but other people might know. I know very
If you
few.
permit me, I just have a subset of what we're discussing here, and it's a question that comes to the face of every feminist very often. When another woman says that, why do women need to fight for their rights when we can just allow for everything to be based on merit? Do feminists sometimes find that their bigger enemies are among women who are sitting in positions of privilege and say they never had to battle gender discrimination along their journey to success?
No, I can understood the last part of the description. We are talking of women who never had to face battles. But what was the question?
So, do you think sometimes they're the ones who do the most disservice to the feminist movement because they clearly are speaking from a position of privilege? If they did not have to fight or struggle through to, let's say, have success or reach to the top.
And you're asking why aren't they doing more for us, the
No, I'm
women?
just saying that sometimes does the feminist movement get a setback because you've got iconic women who will turn around and say, I had no gender discrimination and I am now the CEO of this global corporation.
Oh, but that will happen all the time. I mean, you just have to neglect them. You have to ignore them. I mean, take let's take for a minute shift from women to Dalit. Tell me, what have you seen? We see some wonderful male Dalit leaders and women Dalit leaders too. But you also know that there are Dalits who have made it, and have they really transformed the role of Dalits? So we can't ask for this. I remember studying the black movement during the early days when Mirdal wrote his first book, which was about black. And they used to be an abuse for men who escaped from the South, from slavery, managed to get to Boston and other places, then became rich businessmen. And the whites used to laugh at them and say, look at him, he's got a swimming pool and he's got 5 cars. He couldn't get a damn about what's happened in the South. So everywhere you will find that there will be layers, like among women, among blacks, among Dalits, who are not necessarily going to struggle. They may have arrived. To ask why are they not in the struggle is to ask a question which is challenges a human person. Human beings can be of various kinds, but ground level uprisings, like we did during the Shine Bagh and others, I mean, it was amazing, wasn't it? Not only what the women who were sitting there, but the young people, the students who made that happen. So that is where we have a great opportunity. The students and the civil society children that we have, we can't expect it under a category like caste or religion or even economic opportunity. It has to be some kind of mob which comes out of itself. Look at the farmers, for example. It's just come out of them. Who would have thought that they would be so united and so strong across regions and things? I never imagined that. So there is something that has to happen. And it's people like you and the women's movement who can make that happen. If you can do what the farmers have done against all these repressive anti-liberation laws, including love jihad, you will put the government on bay. Remember, we managed to get the CAA thing pushed because of the Shaheen Bagh movement. So we can do one against the love jihad movement. And this can be done by your groups, that is the groups that came up during Shaheen Bagh. It's not beyond us. And still there is space. Maybe I don't know enough. I'm now 87. I may not live for more than a year or two, if that at all. But this is the time when we can strike and get that thing done by broad-based solidarity. And we can ride on the farmers' struggle in the sense that there must be others behind that struggle to push against this kind of anti-democratic government that we have right now.
Indeed.
You must
Sorry, I lost your audio there. What were you saying? I lost your last sentence.
No, I was saying, there was a time when, I don't want to show off, but everyone knows that I'm an old friend of Gloria Steinem. I shed that kind of idea that they are the icons. We are the icons for India. But there was a time when she used to tell me that
I think we had some little bit of an audio glitch there. I was actually quite interested in that Gloria Steinem story, but we seem to have lost the audio right there with her. But it's been a fascinating conversation. There, we're back with you. We're back. You were just telling us about your conversation with Gloria Steinem.
No, I was saying that the fact that electorate did not come out to vote was a very big issue in the failure of American democracy to elect people who are useful and good. So in the same way, we have to now use the electoral system to bring ourselves in. And you're right, you asked the question, what do I think of the women in power today? There are so many women in power today. But that's the critical issue, no? That you can be a woman, but need not be a feminist. You can be a Dalit leader, but you need not be fighting for Dalit rights. You can be a Muslim leader, not necessarily. It's not always the case that a person belongs to a social category, becomes a champion for their rights. That's a very rare thing. So we have to create that. It's not easy. But in the old days, I can tell you, people like Aruna Safali, Kamala Devi Chattopadhyaya, they were leaders of women. They brought women wherever they went. But you don't see that happening with, I don't want to name them, but you know who I mean, the cabinet ministers that we have today.
Yes.
There's a word for them. They're called male impersonators.
I'm worried that that's going to be... Well said. Yeah, indeed. Well, we do need women like you to say this again and again and again, to keep us inspired, to keep us going, to keep us alive in our own battles and struggles, both every day and the larger ones in front of us. I do thank you for joining us, Devaki Jain, and it's been an absolute pleasure reading the Brass Notebook and your memoir. Thank you very much for joining us here on the Women Writers Festival.
Thank you, Shaili, for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.